Hello, my name is Vesper. My parents skipped my wedding to take a cruise, and when I called to ask why, they laughed. Said it wasn't important. Said it wasn't a royal wedding. They never sent a card. They never apologized. But weeks later, after my father had a stroke, they begged me to come back, to be the reliable one. All my life, I thought if I stayed quiet, they'd eventually see me. But what if being quiet was exactly how they erased me? Would you have called them back? Because I did, but only to say one thing. That was the moment something in me didn't just break, it went cold. I remember just standing there in my driveway, the boxy envelope still in my hand. The breeze brushed past my arms, and somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower droned. But all I heard was the echo of their laughter, not just in the phone call, but in my memory. That slow, familiar chuckle from my dad, and my mom's high-pitched amusement. They weren't being cruel, not in the way most people think cruelty sounds. It was worse. They sounded amused. Like my wedding, my life, my effort, was an inconvenience. The mail had come late that Friday. I had been waiting, honestly hoping, for a confirmation. Something. Anything. Instead, I got a stiff, unopened envelope marked in red ink. Return to sender, not registered. No note, no scribbled apology on the back. Nothing. It was addressed properly. I checked the handwriting 3 times. I even Googled the postal code to make sure I didn't mess something up. I hadn't. I had spent over a week writing every wedding invite by hand, trying to make each one feel personal. My parents' envelope had been different. Cream-colored, embossed with soft gold edges. I'd added a wax seal. I wanted them to feel how much I still hoped they'd care. But they didn't. Later that night, after reheating leftover lentil soup and leaving it half-finished on the stove, I sat on the porch with my phone in hand. I had a glass of water, my favorite blanket over my legs, and every part of me was begging to just let it go. But my thumb hit call before my brain caught up. Mom answered. "Oh, hi, sweetheart. We're just finishing up dinner," she said, her voice bright but distracted. In the background, I heard ice clinking in glasses, the hum of chatter, a burst of laughter. Not the kind you hear at home. The kind you hear in a lounge, a bar, maybe somewhere with open water in the distance. Did you get the invitation?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. I could hear her fumbling, then a muffled shuffle, the sound of her putting me on speaker. My father chimed in first. "Oh yeah, we saw that." Then came the chuckle, the same one I used to hear when I brought home report cards, straight A's, and he'd say, "Well, of course you did. That's expected, isn't it?" My mom said it next, flat and breezy. "Come on, Vesp, it's not like it's a royal wedding." The laughter that followed didn't belong to them alone. I heard others. Someone called out something I couldn't quite make out. Probably a server. They were on a cruise. I didn't say anything. I didn't hang up. I just waited. Eventually, the line went dead. I hadn't even noticed they'd ended the call. I sat on that porch until the sky shifted from purple to ink. The wind picked up. Somewhere, a dog barked. I pulled the blanket tighter. Not because I was cold, but because I didn't know what else to hold on to. It wasn't the first time they had made me feel small, but it was the first time they laughed while doing it. Out loud, on speaker, with a boat full of strangers listening in. Inside, I opened my phone again. I still had the voicemail from last month. Mom's voice, chipper and rushed. "Let us know the exact date and time, okay? We'll try to make it. Cruises are cheaper in the fall, though, so we'll see." I played it 3 times. Each time, it sounded more like a brush-off than before. On the 4th play, I deleted it. Then I walked back inside, turned off the stove, and poured the cold soup down the sink. The drain gurgled like it didn't want to swallow it either. They weren't coming. They had never planned to. I didn't tell Ronan that night. He was still at his site, late shift, overseeing some zoning inspection across town. I just texted him. "Long day, gonna read and sleep early." He'd know not to push. He always did. That night, I climbed into bed fully clothed. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even sigh. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. It's funny how quiet betrayal sounds when it's been practiced your whole life. And just before I drifted into sleep, not from peace, but from exhaustion, one thought whispered through me like static. If my wedding wasn't important to them, was I ever? That was the night I stopped expecting my parents to show up for me. Ever again. I didn't sleep well. I drifted in and out, waking to every creak of the floorboards, every car that rolled by outside. By the time the sun stretched across the room, I was already downstairs, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I wasn't drinking. The house was quiet. Ronan had left early for the site, leaving a sticky note on the fridge. "Call if you need anything. Don't carry it alone." He knew. He always knew. That evening, after forcing myself through a half-hearted attempt at laundry and clearing out a few wedding boxes I hadn't unpacked yet, I made the mistake of opening Facebook. It was a cousin's post. One of the ones who lives in Plano, always tagging everyone and everything. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I saw it. My parents' 40th anniversary celebration. Giant silver balloons. A tented backyard. A long dinner table draped in white linen. A sign hanging near the head table. Family only. I stared at it. I blinked. Then I looked at the date. It was 4 weeks before my wedding. They hadn't told me. No invite, not a call, not even a text. They had time. They had the ability. They had the address. They just didn't want me there. I clicked through every photo, as if somehow my face might show up in the background by accident. It didn't. Blaine was there, of course. So was his wife, his 2 boys. My parents beamed in every frame, champagne flutes raised, laughter frozen mid-air. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th album, I stopped scrolling. Not because I was done, but because I was tired of pretending I was ever supposed to be included in moments like those. Later that night, after dinner, I stepped out onto the porch to clear my head. That's when I saw it. A medium-sized box propped against the door. No note, no packaging, my name written in my own handwriting across the top. It was the memory box, the one I had sent months ago. I had wrapped it carefully, navy paper, hand-tied ribbon. Inside were things I thought they'd appreciate. My childhood drawings, a few old photos, the letter I got from Cornell when I was accepted. There was a beach photo too, me and Dad, back when I was small enough to ride his shoulders. I had hoped they'd feel something. Nostalgia. Pride. Anything. But it was back now. Unopened. Untouched. I sat down beside it, not ready to pick it up. I just stared at it, the same way you stare at a letter from a lawyer or a text that starts with, "We need to talk." That's where Ronan found me. He stepped outside, barefoot, holding 2 mugs of tea. He handed me one without saying anything and sat next to me, his eyes tracing the box. After a moment, he asked, "Did you think they'd keep it?" I shrugged. I didn't expect a parade, just something, just acknowledgement. He nodded gently. They saw it, they just chose not to open it. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. He stayed beside me while I brought the box in, placed it in the hallway closet, and shut the door. Not locked, not sealed, just out of sight. I spent the next few days operating on autopilot. Work emails, meal prep, replying to thank you cards from guests who actually showed up. Smiling politely when someone said, "Your parents must have been so proud," and nodding like I didn't want to scream. But something had shifted inside me, not loudly, not all at once. It wasn't anger yet. It wasn't even pain. It was something duller, deeper. A quiet awareness that I was no longer waiting to be chosen. And that's what stuck with me most as I lay in bed that Friday night. The same ceiling fan above me, the same silence pressing down on my chest. They hadn't just missed my wedding. They had missed me. Again, and again, and again. That was the night I stopped expecting my parents to show up for me. Ever again. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I didn't shower. I sat in the same hoodie from the night before, curled up on the couch with the blinds drawn halfway, watching light crawl slowly across the floorboards. Everything in me felt muted. Numb wasn't the right word, just stripped. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. A call from Sarah, my cousin on Dad's side. We hadn't spoken in years, not out of spite, just life. But I picked up, if only because I needed something to anchor the day. Her voice was hesitant, unsure. "Hey, Vesp, I've been meaning to call. Look, I'm sorry if I'm stepping into something, but I thought you should know." I froze. She continued, "At the anniversary party, your mom told Aunt Helen that you asked them not to come to the wedding, that you didn't want them there." The silence between us stretched. My heart wasn't racing, my hands didn't shake. It was a different kind of reaction. Cold recognition. "I figured that wasn't true," Sarah added softly. "No," I said flatly. "It wasn't." I thanked her, ended the call, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The cruelty wasn't in the lie. It was in how casually it was told, how easy it was for my mother to reshape the truth and still sleep at night. Around noon, I opened my laptop and logged into my wedding planning emails. I pulled up the hotel reservation, the one where I'd blocked out rooms for family traveling from out of state, including my parents. I called the hotel, asked for the events manager, and introduced myself. "Oh, yes," she said, checking her screen. "You had that beautiful garden ceremony. I remember the candles in the jars. Very elegant." I thanked her and asked if any of the Carringtons had checked in. Her tone changed. "I'm sorry, no. The rooms under that name were never picked up. In fact, they were released the day before the wedding. No call, no cancellation, nothing." I scribbled it down in my notebook, not because I needed proof, but because I was tired of letting things get rewritten. If they were going to create a version of me, I was going to keep track of the original. That night, while folding laundry, I remembered something Blaine had said months earlier, back when I told him Ronan had proposed. He'd leaned back in his leather chair, arms crossed, wearing that fake concerned look he reserved for holidays and family dinners. "I mean, are you sure this is what you want?" he'd said. "You know how family gets. Complicated." At the time, I thought it was just another one of his condescending moments, the kind that dripped with charm but never warmth. Now I saw it for what it was, a warning disguised as concern, planting seeds, soft gaslighting. That way, when the lie about me not inviting them came out, it wouldn't feel so out of place. Just Vesper being complicated again. I started pulling together everything, emails, call logs, RSVP records. I wasn't planning on confronting them. Not yet. But I needed to protect the truth. I needed a record. Because when people lie often enough, they start believing their own version. And I wasn't about to be erased. Later, Ronan came home, tossed his keys in the bowl by the door, and walked into the living room. He looked at me, really looked, and sat down across from me. "They said something, didn't they?" he asked gently. I nodded. "They said I didn't want them at the wedding." He leaned back, sighing through his nose. "You've always given them the benefit of the doubt. Too much." I looked at him. "They didn't just lie, Ronan. They made me the villain in a story I didn't write." He didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "Well, I was there. I saw who showed up. I saw who didn't." That night, I backed up every email onto an external drive. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't playing along anymore. If they were rewriting my life, I was going to take the pen back. The following week moved slowly, like trudging through sand, in shoes 2 sizes too tight. I was still checking things off my post-wedding list, returning a few duplicate gifts, sending final thank you notes, but everything felt hollow, mechanical. Ronan had been giving me space, only checking in with a hand on my shoulder or a soft glance when he passed by. I appreciated that more than words. On Wednesday morning, I opened the mailbox like I always did, not expecting anything important. But there it was, an envelope from my mother. Her handwriting was as perfect as ever, loopy cursive that looked like it belonged on a church bulletin. For a split second, something inside me stirred. Not hope, exactly. Maybe curiosity, maybe some faint part of me that still wanted something more than silence. I brought it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it. It wasn't a card. There was no note, no congratulations, no handwritten, "We're proud of you." It was a folded brochure for a Caribbean cruise. High-gloss paper, colorful pictures, discounts circled in red ink. The name of the ship was scrawled at the bottom in my father's block letters. Starlight Horizon. That was it. That was their response to my wedding. Not a phone call, not a gift, just a printed reminder that they had better plans. I held the brochure between my fingers for a while, letting the paper bend and crack before tossing it into the recycling bin. 3 days later, another envelope arrived. This time, it was from my parents' joint account. A check for $1,000. In the memo line, my father had written, "Offset for 2009 tuition, basis prep." I actually laughed, short, dry, humorless. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't support. It was a ledger entry. A reminder that love, to them, had always come with conditions. That afternoon, I found myself folding laundry in the bedroom. The rhythm of it settled my nerves, gave me something to do with my hands. As I smoothed the corner of a pillowcase, a memory surfaced like it had been waiting for permission. I was 17. It was winter, debate practice had run late, and I stood outside the school building for almost an hour, waiting for someone to pick me up. Blaine had been picked up 30 minutes earlier. I finally walked home in the dark, boots soaked through, hands numb. When I told Mom what happened, she didn't apologize. "You're smart enough to figure it out," she said. "That's the blessing, isn't it?" I'd nodded at the time, but that sentence had stayed with me longer than she'd ever know. Later that evening, I deposited the check, not because I wanted the money, but because I was done carrying their debts, for them or myself. If they thought this closed the books, then fine. Let it be closed. Then I printed out a copy of our wedding program. Simple layout. A photo of Ronan and me, framed beneath the willow tree where we exchanged vows. 2 empty white chairs in the front row. I didn't write a note. I didn't explain. I slipped it into an envelope, addressed it by hand, and dropped it at the post office on my way to pick up groceries. I imagined my mother opening it, flipping it over, waiting for a message that wasn't there. She wouldn't find one, because there was nothing left to say. That night, while we were cleaning up after dinner, Ronan found me at the sink, elbow deep in soapy water. He handed me a dish towel, and I took it without a word. "I saw the envelope on the counter," he said. "They don't owe me anything anymore," I said quietly. "And I don't owe them the version of me they pretend I am." He didn't argue. He didn't have to. The plate in my hands felt lighter than it should have. That was the moment I drew the first real line. Soft, silent, but final. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was done asking to be invited. The next few days passed with the steady rhythm of a routine I had grown into. Coffee, client calls, a walk around the block, dinner with Ronan. I stayed busy, not out of avoidance, but out of something closer to self-preservation. I wasn't stewing anymore. I was observing, like someone documenting weather patterns before a storm. Saturday morning, just as I was cleaning up the breakfast dishes, I got a text from a cousin in Michigan I hadn't heard from since the wedding. "Hey Vesp, just got this in the mail from Aunt Lorraine. Thought you'd want a copy. Hope all's well." Attached was a picture of a printed photo album, the kind people make online these days. The Carrington wedding, a celebration of love, was stamped on the front in looping gold script. I froze. I replied, asked if she could mail it to me. 2 days later, it arrived in a thick padded envelope. I held it in my lap for a few minutes before opening it. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was just curious. But it did matter. The first photo was of Ronan and me standing beneath the willow tree. My name, however, had been printed as Vesta Delani. A typo, sure. But no one had caught it? No one had cared enough to? The captions told a stranger's version of the day. Father of the groom, Mr. Fields, walks mother of the groom to her seat. And beneath a photo of Ronan's parents smiling, there was a simple, family of the groom. No mention of my parents. In the group shots, my name was skipped entirely. Blaine's family was labeled with precision. Blaine, Samantha, and sons Matthew and Tyler. I was just background. Page after page, it was clear. This wasn't just oversight. It was a selective memory being manufactured. I needed fresh air. I grabbed the album, tossed it into my tote bag, and headed across town to see Inez. She opened the door, still holding a half-eaten bagel, and waved me in like she'd been expecting bad news. I placed the album on her coffee table and sat down without saying a word. She flipped through a few pages, eyebrows rising inch by inch. "Vesta?" she asked, holding the cover toward me. "Apparently that's me," I muttered. She scoffed. "They didn't just leave you out. They're rewriting you." When she turned to the captionless group shot, she shook her head slowly. "They're not even subtle," she said. "This isn't memory loss. This is revision." I laughed, sharp, bitter. "I'm not paranoid," I said. "No," she replied, meeting my eyes. "You're edited." That night, after getting home, I settled into the couch with a glass of wine and my laptop. I opened my email. There it was, a new voice message from my mother. "Vesper, honey, let's not make this into something it's not. You're the youngest. You don't need much anyway. You never did." I sat with it, played it again, then a third time. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to myself and saved the subject line as proof. I wasn't saving it for court or confrontation. I was saving it because I knew how this story would twist again if I didn't. I opened a folder on my desktop and began organizing. Screenshots, call logs, voicemails. Not out of vengeance, just documentation. A breadcrumb trail of truths that might matter someday. I wasn't angry, not in the loud, explosive way. I was something colder, steadier, like ice under a lake, silent but deep. Later that week, after dinner, I typed out a short email to Blaine. Subject: Captions body. In case you're wondering, I saw the captions. You forgot to write me out of myself. I didn't expect a reply. I didn't need one. The email was marked as read 5 minutes later. That was all I needed to know. I didn't leave the story. They tried to write it without me. By the time Sunday rolled around, I had already moved on from expecting decency. I didn't need apologies, and I certainly didn't need explanations. But then came the call from Aunt Marlene. She wasn't one for drama, which is probably why she was the one they sent. "Sweetheart, I just thought you should know. Your father had a stroke 2 days ago. He's stable now, but, well, it's been hard on your mother." She paused, like she was waiting for my reaction to lead the conversation. "Thanks for letting me know," I said calmly, holding the phone between my ear and shoulder while typing at my kitchen counter. There was more. Marlene went on about how Lorraine had been overwhelmed, how Blaine had been stepping up with hospital logistics, how everyone's been asking where you are. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just kept typing, pulling up my phone's call log. 27 missed calls. From Lorraine, from Blaine, from cousins I hadn't spoken to since the last family barbecue 7 years ago. All within 3 days. Not a single one on my wedding day. That night, after dinner, I sat down at my laptop. I opened a new message, addressed it to the group thread titled Carrington Core. I hadn't used it in years. I had debated leaving it many times, but never bothered. Subject: 27 missed calls, none on my wedding day. I didn't type anything else. I simply attached a screenshot of the call log. Then I hit send. No responses. But the read receipts lit up one by one. Blaine's was the last. Seen, no reply. I went to bed that night with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The silence that followed wasn't an absence. It was confirmation. Their guilt was never going to be loud. but it was going to be noticed. 2 days later, Inez texted me, "You in the mood for something stupid?" She had screen capped a video shared in the old family WhatsApp group. One of those "Remember This" posts. Blaine, 23, fake microphone in hand, doing a mocking impression of me delivering a debate speech at 17. He raised his voice an octave too high, exaggerated every gesture, twisted every sentence. The family roared with laughter in the background. Underneath the clip, someone had commented, "Classic Blaine. We still laugh at this one." I stared at the video, remembering the exact night it had been recorded, the way I'd laughed along, even though my face burned. How no one, absolutely no one, had told him to stop. I scrolled up and saw that Lorraine had responded with a laughing emoji, and Blaine had replied, "Ah, Vesper always took herself so seriously." This time, I didn't let it sit. I clicked Reply All. Thanks for reminding me what family support always looked like. Then I left the group. Simple, clean, unapologetic. That evening, I was in the living room folding laundry when Ronan walked in. He noticed the phone still in my hand. "You okay?" he asked, standing by the doorway. I nodded. "Yeah." For the first time, I didn't just swallow it. He didn't say anything, just walked over, took the phone from me, set it down on the table, and kissed the top of my head. It wasn't grand, it wasn't a rescue, but it was real. I didn't need a family that laughed at my expense. I needed peace, and boundaries, and the right to finally stop explaining myself. They called it humor. I called it the last time. The following Tuesday, the first message came while I was boiling pasta. I heard the buzz from across the kitchen, checked my phone, and saw Lorraine's name on the screen. Missed call. Then another. By the third, I turned the stove off. The voicemail was brief. Her voice sounded almost rehearsed. "Hi, Vesper. Your father's had a minor stroke. He's in rehab now. We're holding things together, but you're still family, and it's time you came home." She ended with a tone that wasn't grief. It was management, like she was trying to schedule a plumber. An hour later, Blaine called. I didn't answer. His text followed, predictable as clockwork. "Look, this is the time to rise above everything. Dad needs care. You're the stable one. You've always been reliable." There it was, the spin. Not, "We miss you." Not, "We're sorry." Not even, "We were wrong." Just the same old script. You're the stable one, meaning you're the one we can burden. You've always been reliable, meaning we don't have to treat you well. You'll show up anyway. It wasn't love. It was logistics. That night, I sat in the backyard with Ronan, the cicadas humming low in the distance, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea I wasn't really drinking. He didn't say much, just watched the moon drift behind clouds and let me sort through my own silence. "I think I'm supposed to forget everything now," I said finally. He looked at me. "You're not required to carry the whole house just because you know where the nails are." I smiled, because he always found a way to say something that made sense without sounding like a quote from a therapist's calendar. 2 days later, I stopped at a small bookstore near the park. I needed air, distraction, shelves of stories that didn't belong to me. As I browsed, someone tapped my shoulder. "Vesper? My God, I almost didn't recognize you." It was Edna May, my mom's oldest friend, the one who used to bake ginger cookies and tell us to keep our elbows off her table. We caught up briefly, traded vague pleasantries, and then she said it. So casually, so sweetly. "Lorraine always said you were different, you know? Not really like Blaine or her. Always a little removed. Thoughtful, I guess." She meant it kindly, but it hit like gravel against skin. Removed. Not like us. Even when I was little, I must have been the alien in the room. The kid they didn't quite know what to do with. I left the bookstore without buying anything. I sat in the car for 10 minutes with the keys in my hand before driving home. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter, not to send, not to fight, just to empty it from my chest. I didn't walk away, I wrote. I was walked past, too many times. I stood in the room, waved, begged, performed, but I was never seen. Not really. I folded it in half, took it out back, and burned it in the fire pit. The flame was quiet, controlled. It didn't roar, it just consumed what needed to be gone. Later that evening, as Ronan loaded the dishwasher and I wiped the counters, I said it aloud. Not for effect, not for drama, just to finally name the truth. They don't want me back, I said. They want the role I used to play. He stopped, turned to face me, and I've already left the stage. The next morning began the way I hoped most mornings would. Quiet, gentle, unhurried. The kind of silence that doesn't ache, just fills the space like breath. Claire was asleep in her crib, cheeks flushed from dreams, the light filtering through the blinds in long, soft stripes across the living room floor. I hadn't touched my coffee yet. It sat cooling on the side table beside me, steam barely curling from the rim. I was sitting cross-legged on the rug, a small plastic bin open in front of me. Wedding keepsakes, packed away by Ronan months ago when I couldn't face them. Not angry, not heartbroken, just tired. He hadn't pressed, just labeled the bin "Someday" in neat block letters and left it in the hall closet. Now it was someday. Inside were pieces of a celebration I barely remembered now for the party part, ribbon from my bouquet, handwritten vows on note cards I hadn't reread since we exchanged them, a place card with my new name printed in elegant script. Beneath a folded cloth napkin was the wedding photo, our official portrait, the one we'd framed in pale wood and left boxed when we moved. I held it up to the light. The image glowed with the kind of golden warmth that only exists for a few fleeting minutes before sunset. Ronan had his arm wrapped loosely around my waist. My hair was coming undone in the wind. We both looked like ourselves, not the polished versions, just the real ones. Grinning, slightly messy, full of something real. It should have been a picture full of nothing but joy. But my eyes kept drifting to the front row. 2 folding chairs sat empty, right in the center, clean, white, and glaringly unoccupied. We hadn't assigned names to them, not because we forgot, because we didn't want the confrontation. We didn't want to admit to anyone, especially not ourselves, that those chairs had always carried a question mark. Everyone knew who they were for. My mother and father. They knew the date. They received the invitation. There were no emergencies, no disasters, no phone calls. They just didn't come. No explanation, no apology, no regret. They made a choice. And 18 months later, as I sat there staring at that photograph, I expected to feel something sharp. Sadness, maybe, or anger, maybe even longing. But I didn't. There was no heat behind my eyes, no tightening in my chest. What I felt was certainty. Not grief, not bitterness, just confirmation of what I already knew. Around mid-afternoon, I was rocking Claire in the glider, her tiny breath sinking with the creak of the chair. Her fingers curled gently around the edge of my shirt, and her lashes fluttered against her cheeks like small wings. I could feel her whole weight tucked against me, that impossible softness only babies have. That's when Ronan came in from the backyard, phone in hand. He didn't say anything at first, just walked over quietly and held the screen out for me to see. It was a picture he'd posted earlier that morning, Claire asleep in his arms during our walk, a tiny daisy still clutched in her fist from where she'd plucked it near the path. Below the photo, one comment stood out in bold. "Your daughter will be so lucky," it read. It was from Mrs. Harker, my 3rd-grade teacher. A woman I hadn't spoken to in years, but who once sat beside me after a spelling bee and said, "You don't have to earn love to deserve it." I read her words 3 times. They didn't sting. They didn't trigger anything unresolved. They settled. Quietly, like puzzle pieces finally locking into place. That evening, after Claire was asleep and Ronan was finishing dishes at the sink, I stood in the hallway with my phone in my hand. I didn't pace. I didn't rehearse. I didn't even breathe too deeply. I just tapped the top contact in my favorites list, the one I'd left there out of habit. Mom. She picked up on the third ring. Vesper, she said, like she'd been waiting, like she'd known. I knew you'd call, she added, her voice just a little too bright, a little too pleased. As if this moment confirmed something for her. I knew you'd come around. Your father, he's still not well, of course, and this year's been hard, for all of us. She kept talking, trying to cast herself as someone who had suffered with me, not because of me. She was spinning a net of excuses, half-truths, and polished grievances. I let her speak, let the rhythm of her voice trail on until it faltered from lack of encouragement. Then, evenly, I asked, "Do you remember when I called you about the wedding, and you laughed?" Her silence was sudden and exact. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tremble. "I laughed when I saw your message," I said, quiet, honest. Another pause. Then I ended the call, blocked the number. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. Ronan turned, saw my face, and didn't ask a thing. He just nodded. Before bed, I took the wedding photo out of the box and brought it into Claire's room. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of her nightlight. I wiped the glass with the edge of my sleeve, set the frame gently on her dresser beside the books and lullaby CDs. Then I picked up a pen and, in slow, deliberate strokes, wrote along the bottom edge of the frame. Chairs weren't empty. They were open. That was the truth I could finally carry. Not a scar, not a wish, just a choice made in peace. Those seats hadn't been abandoned. They'd been waiting for the people who showed up, for the ones who chose us. I didn't lose a family. I cleared space for one. The next morning came without pretense. No tightness in my chest, no weight pressing behind my eyes, no silent rehearsals of confrontations that would never happen. It came simply, on time, uncomplicated, soft around the edges, like mornings are supposed to be. Claire stirred just after 6. I heard the familiar rustle of her sleep sack before I saw her, her hands stretching up slowly, like flowers toward sunlight. That small, sleepy reach, the one where she tucks her fists near her ears and yawns with her whole body, made something inside me ache in the gentlest way. I scooped her up, warm and impossibly small, her cheek pressed against my shoulder, and carried her downstairs. The kitchen was full of light, the kind of early golden glow that slips over everything quietly, casting soft shadows, making even the familiar feel new. Sunlight spilled across the countertop and danced on the refrigerator door, chasing away the heaviness that used to settle in the corners like dust. That weight, the waiting, the wishing, the what-ifs, was gone now. I set Claire in her high chair, humming as I peeled a banana and sliced it into small crescent moons. I stirred oatmeal in her bowl, the way I had more mornings than I could count. Nothing in the routine had changed, but I had. The difference was peace, not the silence of foundation for a legal case, than anything resembling closure. I had built this archive when I still believed the truth had to be proven, when I thought being believed meant being defended by evidence, when I didn't trust that my lived experience, my memory, my voice, was enough. I selected every file, clicked delete. The message popped up on my screen. "Are you sure you want to delete 287 items?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. No backup. No copied folder tucked away. No just-in-case memory stick. I wasn't keeping receipts anymore. I wasn't preparing for another round of explaining my own story to people who had already decided not to listen. I was done living like I owed anyone a courtroom version of my pain. That afternoon, we celebrated Claire's name day with a picnic by the lake. Just us, the sun, and the sound of her laughter echoing off the trees. Ronan had crafted a little paper butterfly, yellow with black-tipped wings, and tied it to a thin stick with clear thread. Claire chased it across the picnic blanket, squealing each time it floated just out of reach, her curls catching the breeze. Around noon, Inez arrived with lemonade, extra napkins, and 2 folding chairs slung over her shoulder. No gifts, no toasts, no performance, just presents. She sat beside me as I watched Claire scoop up fistfuls of clover and grass, utterly delighted by the feel of the earth in her hands. "She's happy," I said quietly, as if saying it too loud might change it. Inez nodded without looking away from Claire. "She knows she's safe. That's all any of us ever needed." I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who learned how to be small in all the right places, who kept her voice low, her questions polite, her joy measured, who shrank to fit the rooms she was allowed into and still never felt truly welcome. Claire would never carry that legacy. Not from me. "She'll never have to earn love by being small," I said, the words more vow than observation. Inez placed her hand over mine. "Because you stopped shrinking for them." That evening, once Claire was tucked into her crib, Ronan and I sat on the back porch with glasses of iced tea. Fireflies blinked along the edge of the yard like tiny lighthouses. Somewhere across the street, a sprinkler hissed to life, watering a lawn that had never looked particularly thirsty. Ronan glanced at his phone, then turned the screen toward me. A message from a distant cousin lit up the group thread. "Just FYI, Uncle Walter's doing better. Blaine's taken over the finances. Everything's being handled now." I nodded. No bitterness, no sting. Just information, suppressing a scream, but the kind that hums low in your bones when you know you're safe. I didn't glance at the door, half expecting a letter. I didn't unlock my phone looking for missed calls. That part of me, the one that still flinched, still hoped, still waited, was quiet now. Not silenced. Just at rest. After breakfast, Claire went down for her nap, her head resting on my shoulder before I even reached the crib. Ronan was out back with the clippers, trimming the hedges while the dog chased falling leaves like they were treasure. I sat at my desk, sipping coffee gone lukewarm, and opened my laptop. My cursor hovered over a folder I hadn't touched in months. Carrington Archive. Hundreds of digital files stared back at me. Emails, transcriptions, screenshots, audio clips. Carefully cataloged, color-coded, labeled by date, topic, sender. It looked more like the no one had reached out to me, and for the first time, I was grateful. Back inside, I opened Claire's baby book, the one with her birth announcement taped to the front cover, and tiny hospital bracelets pressed between the pages. I slipped in a photo from the picnic. Claire's face was lit by sun, daisy petals caught in her hair like a crown she didn't know she wore. Then I opened my journal, and I wrote one final letter. Not to them, not to Ronan, not to Claire, to the girl I used to be. "Hi, my name is Bridget. My sister told the world I was a failure, said I didn't belong, said I couldn't handle real life. But last week, I walked into the courtroom where she was being investigated, and the judge stopped everything, looked at me and said, 'Wait, is that the governor?' They weren't expecting me to show up. They definitely weren't expecting me to hold the truth. What happens when the family that erased you suddenly needs your name to survive? What happens when silence doesn't protect them anymore? Do they apologize, or do they try to erase you all over again? You ever been the ghost at your own family table? Let me tell you what really happened. I didn't expect a warm welcome, but I didn't expect to feel invisible either. The auditorium buzzed with the kind of polished energy that comes from power dressing and name tags with gold embossing. I walked in through the side entrance, deliberately avoiding the carpeted walkway where sponsors and speakers were being announced like royalty. The State Bar Conference wasn't my kind of stage, not anymore. But it used to be. A long time ago, before everything fractured, I imagined myself standing behind a podium like the one now framed by spotlights. Instead, I found a seat near the back, behind a tall man with too much cologne and a woman typing furiously on a MacBook. My seat creaked as I settled in, the kind of sound that draws attention even when you don't want it. No one turned around. That was the thing. No one ever really saw me unless I was convenient. Then I saw her. Valletta stood off to the side of the stage, flawless in her navy suit and signature red lipstick. She looked like she belonged there. The room leaned toward her, unconsciously, like plants angling for the sun. And our mother, Mary Bell, was already in the front row, clutching a program like it was scripture. She didn't look back. When they introduced Valletta as the future of justice in Texas, the applause was immediate. Loud, proud, and entirely theirs. I didn't clap. I couldn't. As Valletta took the stage, the giant screen behind her flickered through a slideshow. Smiling families, legal outreach programs, community restoration efforts. My throat tightened. One of the photos, blurred slightly, was from the very project I'd spent 3 years building. I remembered the night that picture was taken. I remembered the rain, the woman who'd hugged me after we helped her apply for emergency housing, the smell of mildew in that tiny office we'd turned into a makeshift support center. But my name was gone. In its place, the project was credited to the Jarnell Initiative, with Valletta listed as its founding force. She spoke about resilience and sacrifice. She used my words I'd once scribbled on the back of a napkin during an overnight shift, and repackaged them in pristine legalese. I stared straight ahead, my face blank. My hand moved to my purse, pulled out my phone. I opened the calendar, found the event labeled Valletta's Panel, RSVP'd, and deleted it. No one noticed. After the session, the mingling began. I lingered near the exit, unsure if I should leave or confront. Something. Anything. Our mother caught sight of me then. For a moment, our eyes met. Then she turned to a woman in a burgundy pantsuit and said, "Both my daughters are here today. You've met Valletta, of course." She gestured toward the stage, where Valletta was now surrounded by a semicircle of admirers. "She's remarkable, isn't she?" The woman nodded, then turned to me. "And you? Are you one of the interns helping with the press kit?" I smiled, small and sharp. "No, I'm just here." Maribel didn't correct her. She didn't even blink. I stepped outside before anyone else could speak to me. The late afternoon sun had dipped behind the Capitol dome, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I walked past a banner with Valletta's face on it, smiling, promising, perfect. My heels echoed down the pavement like punctuation marks I didn't choose. As I crossed the side entrance, I caught sight of a poster, an old photo from when the Bar Association first launched its community defense program. I wasn't in the frame, but I remembered being there, just out of shot, holding a clipboard and a case file, back when I thought systems could be fixed from the inside. Funny. That dream lasted longer than most of my relationships. I paused. Not because I wanted to remember, but because forgetting felt like betrayal. Back in 4th grade, I once told my teacher during career day, "I want to change the system." Now, the system had my sister's face, my name deleted, and my work sewn into someone else's suit pocket. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just ready. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had disappeared behind the live oaks lining the curb. The house looked the same, white brick, green shutters, porch light glowing just dim enough to say, "We're home," but not bright enough to say, "You're welcome." I sat there for a moment, watching the curtains shift in the living room window. Someone had seen me pull up. No one came to open the door. I still had a spare key. It was probably a mistake they hadn't changed the locks, but mistakes were a family tradition around here. I let myself in and was met by the scent of overcooked vegetables and lemon polish. The same smell I remembered clinging to my school bag as a kid, and to my pillowcases when I'd cry into them quietly enough not to get asked why. The hallway felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe the house had shrunk, or maybe I'd grown beyond it. Laughter floated in from the dining room, forks tapping china, glasses clinking, my father's unmistakable deep voice cutting through the air like a judge clearing his throat. I stopped just shy of the doorway and took a second before stepping inside. The table was fully set, 6 seats, all occupied. I counted them twice. No empty chair waited for me, no place card. Not even a mismatched plate at the corner, like I used to get at Thanksgiving when extra guests showed up. They saw me. Of course they did. My father glanced up mid-sentence, said nothing. My mother smiled like it hurt. Valletta didn't even flinch. She continued telling some story about a district attorney she'd put in check during a panel debate last week. Everyone laughed on cue. I didn't sit. There was nowhere to. I leaned against the entryway wall, folding my arms, listening. I stayed silent long enough for them to pretend my presence wasn't a disruption. That's how we did things. Smooth denial. Ignore it long enough, and maybe it'll go away. When dessert came out, Mom reached under the table and pulled out a small gift box wrapped in striped paper, last Christmas's leftovers. On top was a crooked tag with my name on it. She handed it to Valletta. "You didn't want it," she said without looking at me, "so I gave it to your sister." Valletta accepted the box like she was being handed a business card. No emotion, no acknowledgement. She didn't even unwrap it, just set it beside her plate and returned to her wine. I didn't ask what it was. I already knew. An old scarf I'd once said was too itchy, a scarf I'd left behind on purpose when I left the house the last time. My mother must have found it in the hall closet and decided it was unclaimed property, something to be redistributed. I stepped outside without a word. The air had cooled down since I arrived. A breeze tugged at my sleeves as I leaned against the car and pulled out my phone. A voicemail blinked. "Drexel." I called him back. "You okay?" he asked before I could say anything. "They're still pretending I'm nobody," I replied, staring up at the porch light. A pause. Then his voice lowered. "You ready to remind them who you are?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how far they'll go." He didn't need further explanation. Drexel was good at knowing when I needed to talk and when I needed to wait. This was a waiting moment. I stayed outside for a while longer, the sound of dishes clinking through the open window. Someone said something about legacy. Someone else laughed. Probably Dad. He always laughed at anything that implied control. Eventually, I slipped back inside, unnoticed. I wandered down the hall, past the gallery of family photos. They had been rearranged, newer frames, bigger smiles. I paused in front of one from our childhood. Christmas morning, matching pajamas. But something was off. The cropping. I wasn't in it anymore. My edge had been cut out, the right side blurred just enough to seem intentional. I stood there, long enough for Valletta to appear beside me. "Don't linger," she muttered, half a smile curling on her face. "You always did have a thing for drama." I kept my gaze on the photo. Cropping doesn't change what was captured. She walked away. I didn't follow. I didn't sleep much that night. I wasn't restless, just clear. Clarity has a way of keeping you awake without stirring. I made tea around 2, watched the steam drift off the rim like a breath I wasn't ready to exhale, and let the silence settle around me, like a coat I no longer needed to take off in their presence. By morning, my calendar was empty except for a single generic email invite. Subject line: Charity Gala, Austin City Foundation. No greeting, no sender name, just a time, a location, and a note. See you there. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. When I walked into the ballroom that evening, I did it the way they always assumed I wouldn't. Quietly, without a camera crew, without a name tag, and without fanfare. The chandeliers were doing too much, dangling like overcompensation. Tables were wrapped in gold linen, the kind of showy softness that people mistake for elegance. Drexel met me by the bar. He looked sharp, crisp gray suit, and that same dry expression he wore when he knew something was about to unravel. "You're really doing this?" he asked, sipping from a glass of water like it was vodka. I nodded. "I want to see how low they think I still am." He didn't push back. It didn't take long. Valletta had already worked the room into her orbit. She stood under one of those spotlights, like they had custom-rigged it, just to land perfectly on her hair. Flawless, poised. She laughed with donors like she'd known them since birth. I stood by the far end of the room, sipping Pinot Noir I didn't even like, and watched it unfold. Then came the moment. Valletta caught sight of me. Her smile didn't falter. She lifted her glass, waved slightly to a man in a tux, and said, loud enough for the 3 reporters nearby to hear, "That's Bridget. She's helping out on the press team tonight. A real asset in logistics." A beat. Then the man turned, looked me up and down, and said, "Nice to see young blood still doing groundwork." Groundwork. The word landed like a punch in slow motion. Drexel stiffened. I didn't. I just kept sipping. Cameras flashed. Valletta had already moved on. I didn't respond. Didn't correct anyone. Didn't even blink. I simply walked toward the edge of the room where a server passed by with a tray of wine. I grabbed a second glass and moved toward the back. If they wanted to think I was the intern, let them. But interns don't usually donate 6 figures under an alias. I waited until the second round of speeches died down, then found the event director, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a clipboard like it was her shield. I approached her without introduction. "Excuse me," I said, calm and polite. She looked up, startled. I handed her a printed receipt. "This is a record of the Foundation's largest anonymous contribution this quarter. It came from a donor listed as R. Varnes Holdings. That's me." She blinked, looked down, scanned the document. Her mouth parted, then closed. "I didn't come to be thanked," I said, "but if anyone asks what interns do here, tell them we bankroll the lights." Then I walked away. No microphone, no spotlight, just a mirror, and I'd handed it to her gently. Drexel caught up with me by the hallway near the staff entrance. "That was brutal," he whispered. "It wasn't," I said. "It was just honest. I wasn't there to humiliate her. I was there to calibrate the truth. And if it cut her in the process, well, that wasn't my hand on the blade." Later, as the event thinned out and waitstaff began clearing plates, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Valletta. She looked calm. Too calm. "What was that?" she asked, each word pulled like thread between her teeth. "You mean the donation?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. She crossed her arms. "You trying to embarrass me?" I shook my head slowly. "You should stop assuming I'm still surviving." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm observing, and you're providing content." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. That was the thing about people who live in curated stories. They never expect someone else to hold the original draft. She left without saying goodbye. I stayed a little longer, not to celebrate, not to bask, just to make sure the lights were still on. By Monday morning, the buzz from the gala had already faded into curated photos and quotes stripped of truth. The kind of posts people share not because they care, but because it makes them look like they do. I arrived at the office early. The parking lot was still half empty, just the way I liked it. Drexel wasn't in yet. I unlocked the door, flipped the lights, and dropped my bag on the corner of my desk. I had intended to review some grant proposals, maybe follow up on a housing initiative stuck in committee. But there it was, a thick, sealed manila envelope lying on my chair, like a challenge waiting to be opened. No sender, no return address, just my name printed on a white label in block letters. Bridget Varnes. I sat down slowly and peeled it open. Inside were 2 copies of a project charter, identical in structure, not in substance. The first was mine. I recognized it immediately. Dated 7 years back, the header still bore the name of the pilot I'd built. Community Legal Pathways, my proudest blueprint, handwritten notes in the margins still faintly visible after scanning. My name was there, typed clearly beneath the title. Founder, Bridget K. Varnes. The second document, same project title, same content, except the credit had been wiped and replaced. Founder, Valletta Jarnell. This version was notarized. 2 months after the original, signed off with a stamp from a notary public in Travis County. All official, all neat. Except it wasn't. I didn't flinch. I didn't rage or call anyone. I just read it twice, then set both pages side by side on the desk and stared at them like they were opposite ends of the same lie. It wasn't just theft. It was calculated repackaging, reframing history to make it more palatable under a more reputable name. The door clicked open. Drexel stepped in, holding a coffee and a bagel in one hand, phone balanced in the other. "You get here before the alarm again?" he asked, half teasing. I didn't respond right away, just slid the papers across the desk toward him. He scanned the first, then the second. His eyebrows lifted. "Well," he said, setting down his coffee, "this is sloppy. Smart, but sloppy." "You see the notary date?" I asked. "Yep. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an overwrite." He tapped the corner of the notarized page. "Somebody wanted this buried, and somebody else wanted it to be found." I folded my arms. "Not through the courts." "No. Through you," he said. "They want you to decide what it's worth." I nodded. I didn't copy the pages, didn't digitize them. I slipped them into the drawer beside my desk and closed it slowly. Drexel didn't push. He knew the silence was strategy, not surrender. That evening, I was invited to a small policy roundtable hosted by a local reform group. I went not because I felt like networking, but because I needed to be in a room where my name hadn't been photoshopped out of the story. Valletta wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She never came to events unless there were press badges and cocktail hours. But Maribel was. She sat at the end of the room, hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing that same cream sweater she always wore when she wanted to look like the mother of the year. We made eye contact across the room, the kind that only lasts when neither party wants to start a war, but neither wants to wave the white flag either. After the panel ended and people began drifting out, I approached her quietly. She stood before I reached her. "Bridget," she said, smiling like nothing had happened. Like her last act hadn't been handing my name to someone else, like an old coat no one wanted to claim. I leaned in and asked gently, "What do you think I gave up to get out?" She blinked, caught off guard. Her face stiffened, just for a moment. Then she answered, just as softly, "Your name." I nodded. "And she's still using it." She didn't respond. She just touched her necklace, a nervous tic she always had when she wanted to look calm, but didn't feel it. I walked away without another word. On my way home, I took the long route, detouring through a neighborhood where I'd once worked on a mural project with a group of immigrant youth. I hadn't been back in years. I didn't even know if the mural still stood. But there it was, weather-worn but intact, stretching across the length of a concrete retaining wall like a statement no one had asked permission to make. Faces, words, symbols of resistance. And in the bottom right corner, just above the faded paint splatter, were the initials, BK. I pulled over, turned off the engine, rolled down the window. The wind carried faint laughter from a nearby park. Someone was playing music out of an old speaker. I sat there and looked at that mural for a long time. The first time in years my name had been attached to something that hadn't been altered, rebranded, or reclaimed by someone else. No applause, no plaque, just truth, in paint, holding up under time. And it was enough. The mural faded in my rearview mirror, but the feeling didn't. It clung to me the whole way home, something raw and grounding. I didn't need to be named in bronze. That wall, chipped and unfiltered, told the truth without needing permission. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had already dipped low, dragging a quiet over the city like a blanket settling in. I slept better than I had in weeks. 3 days later, Drexel stood in my office doorway, holding a folded printout. "It's official," he said. "Preliminary hearing, Valletta, public docket, Travis County Courthouse, Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. No press listed yet." I didn't say anything, just nodded, walked over to the calendar on my wall, and circled the date. I didn't tell him I was going. I didn't need to. He already knew. Wednesday came fast. I left before sunrise. No assistant, no security detail. I took the south entrance. No banners, no flashbulbs, No one waiting. Just me and the sound of my shoes tapping across the stone floor. The cold inside the courthouse was the kind that settled into your wrists and held on, like memory. Courtroom 3B was quiet when I arrived. It was still early. A bailiff with a clipboard looked up as I entered, but didn't stop me. I took a seat in the last row. No one recognized me yet. I didn't dress to be seen. I wore all black, no makeup, my hair pulled back simply. The kind of look that says, I'm here to listen. Nothing more. People trickled in slowly, lawyers in stiff suits, clerks carrying files too thick for a single hearing. Then Valletta entered, flanked by her defense team like armor. Her suit was perfect, her posture rehearsed. She glanced once toward the back, expression unreadable. If she saw me, she didn't show it. Colton and Maribel arrived next. My father, stiff as ever, jaw clenched like he was bracing for war. My mother, well, she wore that same look she always did when things got complicated. Tight lips, tired eyes, pearls around her neck, like they could hold her together. They didn't notice me either. Judge Audrey Jameson entered promptly at 8:30. I remembered her from a conference years ago, sharp, no patience for posturing. She took her seat, scanned the courtroom with that sweeping glance judges have when they want the room to settle. And then she paused. It wasn't dramatic, just a stillness, like a record skipping half a beat. Her gaze fixed on me. I didn't move. She leaned forward slightly, squinted, then spoke into the mic. Flat, direct. Wait, is that Bridget Varnes, the governor? Every head turned. Like a wave, like dominoes, one after another. The courtroom shifted. Colton's face twitched, anger or confusion, maybe both. Maribel's hand flew to her chest. A soft gasp escaped her lips, audible even from the back. Valletta spun around in her chair, eyes locking with mine for the first time in over a year. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I didn't flinch. I just looked back. Even. I could feel the room recalibrating around me, people whispering, adjusting their assumptions. The bailiff near the door checked his roster, confused. Someone raised a phone. A lawyer murmured something to his paralegal. Reporters who'd just begun arriving scrambled for their notepads. But I didn't come to be interviewed. I came to witness. The hearing began like any other. Motions filed, calendar dates set. Valletta's attorney made a case for procedural delay. The prosecutor objected. The usual legal dance. I didn't need to listen. I already knew the rhythms. I had written some of them. The judge glanced at me once more during a recess, but didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Her question had done what it needed to do. When court adjourned for a short break, I stood up quietly, before the room could try to reclaim its control. I walked down the same aisle I'd come in through, past people who suddenly couldn't make eye contact, out the same door, into the morning air. Drexel was waiting by the car, leaned against the hood like he'd been there the whole time. He didn't ask how it went, just looked at me and said, "That was surgical." I shrugged. They needed a witness. I volunteered. He smiled at that, barely. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. I hadn't gone there to make a scene. I hadn't gone there to humiliate anyone. I went to remind the room, and the woman sitting in the center of it, that erasure isn't permanent. You can scrub a name from a file, rewrite a credit line, crop a photo, but you can't erase presence. You can't silence history when it walks in on 2 feet and sits quietly in the back row. It wasn't revenge. It was just a mirror. After the courthouse, I went home through the back roads, windows down, no music. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel much at all. I just kept replaying the moment Judge Jameson called my name, like she was saying it for the first time in a room full of people who had tried to forget I existed. Once inside, I tossed my bag on the bench by the door and headed to my home office. The news was already on, one of those midday programs that fill time between stock updates and weather alerts. Governor Varnes makes surprise appearance at courthouse, the anchor said, linked to her sister's investigation, but no official statement has been released. Good. I didn't need to release anything. The room had spoken for me. The window above my desk was cracked open, letting in the scent of wet oak and the distant hum of lawnmowers from a neighbor's yard. I reached for my tablet, started sifting through a few briefings for next week's education committee hearing. But then my phone buzzed once. Sharp, short, unmistakable. I glanced at the screen. Colton Varnes. Text only. 3 lines. You embarrassed our name. We need to talk. Tonight. No punctuation. Just wait. I stared at it for a full 3 seconds, then hit the lock button and placed the phone screen down. Not even a question. Not even, why were you there? Just judgment, as usual. That man could squeeze an entire trial into 1 sentence and never leave room for appeal. Drexel walked in without knocking, a habit I'd stopped correcting long ago. He carried 2 coffees, one already half empty. Media's spinning, he said. A few think you're planning to run for Senate. One guy suggested it was a family intervention. I raised an eyebrow. An intervention for what? Not being erased quietly? He shrugged. Public loves mystery, keeps them entertained. I sat down in the leather chair across from him. You think I should respond? He hesitated. Would it help? I shook my head. I'll let them keep guessing. He leaned against the filing cabinet. Your dad's probably not guessing. I smiled without warmth. My father thinks my title belongs to him. I'm not sure he even knows what I actually do. That bad, huh? He still introduces me to people as our youngest, like I'm a Labrador, not a policymaker. Drexel gave a low laugh. He's watching you play chess and still thinks it's checkers. Exactly. We let the silence settle for a moment. I could hear birds outside, too loud for this time of day. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. The corners were worn, the spine cracked. I opened it slowly. Inside, on the first page, was a sentence I had written years ago. After the video, after being pushed out of the house with nothing but a duffel bag and my ID. I was the one they erased to preserve the illusion. I whispered it out loud. Not for drama, for practice. I flipped to the next page. You don't owe them the version of yourself that makes them comfortable. That one still hit. Maybe harder now. I closed the notebook and sat with it in my lap. The screen on my phone lit up again. Another message. A follow-up from my father. Come to the house. No press. Just us. There it was. The pull of blood. The assumption of ownership. I picked up the phone and opened a draft reply. I didn't embarrass your name. I just stopped hiding mine. I hovered over send. My thumb rested on it, steady. Then I deleted the message. I typed something else. Let's not pretend this is about family. It never was. Another pause. Another deletion. I set the phone down again. From the other side of the room, Drexel spoke quietly. You gonna respond? No, I said. Let them stew. Silence is louder when they know what you could have said. He nodded. That's cold. No, I replied. That's called growing up. We didn't say anything else. There wasn't anything else to say. I stood and walked to the window, watched as a young woman jogged by, earbuds in, ponytail bouncing like freedom. I wondered what she'd think if she knew someone out there still believed their daughter was a liability. Still thought the worst thing she could do was show up and be seen. Funny how people claim they want strength, until it shows up in their own bloodline. Let them sit in that. Let them hear the echo of what I didn't say. If silence is power, then my father just heard me scream. 2 days passed before Drexel said anything. He waited, like he always did, until the room was quiet, until my phone was face down, and until the air had settled between us like a contract. He stood in my office doorway that morning, with an envelope tucked under his arm, and a look I hadn't seen since the week I left home for good. I think you should sit for this, he said. I didn't. He handed me the folder anyway. Inside were 2 pages, no logo, no header, just text, clean and clinical. You're on a private surveillance list, he said, commissioned through a third-party firm that usually handles internal vetting for political candidates. I flipped the page. It's your father, he added. Colton contracted the sweep personally. Background review, old emails, phone logs, campaign finance audits, even flagged a file from when you rented a U-Haul in Denver 5 years ago. I didn't speak. I scanned the lines like they were weather reports for a storm that had already passed. Quietly, I folded the pages in half and slid them back into the envelope. "They're scared," I finally said. Drexel nodded. "And fear gets sloppy." We didn't talk about it after that. Later that afternoon, Drexel texted from our encrypted archive system. He'd found something else, deeper, older, something the firm didn't mean to surface. It was an audio file tucked inside a cluster of corrupted voicemail data recovered from a decommissioned account Colton had once used. I walked down the hall to Drexel's side office. He was already at his desk, screen lit, earbuds in. He pulled one out and offered it to me. "It's from 11 years ago," he said. "Valletta to your father." He didn't say more. I put the bud in and hit play. Her voice was unmistakable, calm, almost sterile. "She's the one in the video," Valletta said. "If this gets out, you need to cut her loose. Permanently." There was no hesitation in her voice, no remorse, no context, just a directive. I listened once, then again. Not because I didn't believe it, but because my brain needed time to catch up with the part of me that already knew. The betrayal hadn't been a reaction, it had been a decision. Calculated, logged, spoken out loud into a phone line, and filed away like an action item on a to-do list. I didn't cry, but the air changed. Back in my office, I forwarded the file to my legal team with a simple subject line: Archive. Internal use only. Then I closed my laptop and stared at the window. Outside, the city moved like it always did. Pedestrians crossing too slowly, a siren wailing somewhere too far to help. I didn't want to destroy her, but I wasn't hiding anymore either. That night, I made one phone call to the team coordinating an upcoming town hall forum for local constituents. We'd planned to talk about zoning laws and transit budgets. I changed the topic. Family ethics in public leadership, I said. I want that title on the event page. "Should we link this to your sister's hearing?" "No," I answered. "This isn't about her." "But people will assume..." "They'll assume what they need to," I cut in. "I'm just giving them better things to assume." By the next morning, the forum was posted. RSVPs started flooding in. Local reporters requested press access. Political blogs speculated I was laying groundwork for a national run. They were wrong. This wasn't a campaign, it was a correction. The night before the town hall, I drove to my childhood home, not to confront, not to enter, just to leave something. I placed an envelope under the front doormat. Inside, one sheet of paper. On it, a single line. "You didn't erase me, you only postponed the truth." I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I just walked back to my car and drove away, windows down, no music. The next evening, the room was packed. More people than I expected, some old friends, some former staffers, a few new interns who hadn't known my name until last week. I stood at the podium as calmly as if I were reading a grocery list. I didn't mention Valletta. I didn't reference the file. I didn't point fingers. But I told the room what happens when families turn silence into strategy, when loyalty becomes currency, when image matters more than accountability. I spoke plainly. I didn't raise my voice. And near the end, just before the closing remarks, I saw her. Valletta, in the back row. No entourage, no blazer. Just her, in civilian clothes, arms folded across her chest. She didn't stand. She didn't speak. She didn't leave. And I didn't look away. 48 hours after the town hall, I received an email from my mother. No subject line, no message body, just a forwarded calendar invite. Dinner, just family. 7 Tuesur Hal p.m. Sunday. I didn't accept it, didn't decline either. I simply showed up. The house hadn't changed. Same hedges, same wind chimes, same porch light that flickered once every few seconds like a nervous habit. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching the shadows shift behind the curtains. Inside, the table was already set. 7 chairs this time. One of them had a folded napkin placed carefully in front of it. Mine, apparently. The room smelled like baked chicken and rosemary, an attempt at comfort dressed up as familiarity. Colton sat at the head of the table, posture like steel. Valletta was already seated, her face unreadable, hands folded tight in her lap. She didn't look up when I entered. Maribel stood near the kitchen doorway, smoothing down a wrinkle in the table runner that no one but her would ever notice. "It's time we talk about how to move forward," she said, her voice higher than usual. I nodded and took the empty seat. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. No one asked about work. No one brought up the weather. Colton cleared his throat once, then twice, like he was revving up to say something important. Then he slid a manila folder across the table. Valletta looked down. "This is a character reference," he said. "For the court. From you." I didn't touch the folder. "Valletta made mistakes," he went on, "but family fixes family. A letter from you could keep this out of the press, keep her license intact. You're the governor now. That signature means something." I stared at him for a long time. Then at Maribel. Then at Valletta. I reached for my water glass, took a sip, set it down. "Do you remember what she told you?" I asked, eyes on Colton. 11 years ago, about me, the video." Silence. "Because I do," I continued. Word for word. Maribel looked away. Valletta said nothing. The silence wasn't defensive. It was confirmation. I pushed the folder back toward the center of the table. "You didn't invite me here to talk," I said. "You invited me here to leverage me." Colton exhaled sharply. "Bridget, this doesn't have to be a war." I stood slowly, smoothed the crease in my skirt, placed my napkin beside the untouched plate. "If I weren't the governor," I asked, looking each of them in the eye, "would I even be invited tonight?" No one answered. Maribel reached for my hand, tentative, tears already gathering. I stepped back. "You didn't lose me," I told her gently. "You just built a version of this family that had no space for me." Valletta finally looked up then. Her eyes were tired, maybe afraid. I didn't wait to hear what she had to say. I walked out. That same night, I stood behind a podium beneath the rotunda of the Capitol, lights above me bright and sterile. The press was there, cameras blinking red, reporters shifting in their seats. I didn't read from notes. "I'm introducing the Kinship Disclosure Act," I said. "It requires all public officials to disclose familial ties in any ongoing legal investigation or court matter involving abuse of power or ethical misconduct." I paused. "This bill isn't about family, it's about transparency. Legacy without truth is just branding, and branding is not governance." A murmur ran through the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say Valletta's name, but everyone heard it anyway. I left the podium without fielding questions. Drexel met me near the side exit. He said nothing, just held the door open. We walked in, stepped down the marble hallway. Behind me, flashbulbs burst. Ahead of me, the corridor was quiet. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't rage. It was policy. 2 weeks after the bill passed, I found myself in Denver. The official reason was a community leadership summit, but part of me knew it was more than that. The air here had always been different, thinner, sharper, the kind that makes you remember how to breathe on your own. I walked through the lobby of the South District Community Center like I had a dozen times before. No one asked who I was. No one snapped photos. That was the gift of Denver, anonymity without isolation. In the main hallway, a new exhibit had gone up. Youth art, according to the flyer taped to the glass. Visions from the margins. I stepped inside, mostly out of habit. But the second painting caught me. It was a canvas, medium-sized, framed but unpretentious. Bold colors, abstract shapes bleeding into one another. Grit, bloom, silence, defiance. I didn't need to read the title. I knew the piece. I had painted it during one of the hardest years of my life, and left it behind when I moved. assuming it would collect dust or be tossed out. But it had survived. The placard underneath read, Title: Outgrown Artist. Unknown, donated anonymously. And underneath that, in someone's handwriting, added later in black ink, she was never unknown to us. I stood there longer than I should have, pretending I was studying the brushwork. But really, I was letting the moment settle. Not because it was grand, because it was quiet, because it had my name without needing to spell it. Back in Austin, a week later, I received a message from our finance officer, a monthly audit packet. I flipped through the documents absent-mindedly until one page stopped me. A closed bank account, dormant since my 20s, showed an old attempted deposit, $100. Transfer declined. Date, 11 years ago. The week I left home. Sender, Maribel Varnes. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't the money, it was the pause it created inside me. Not a gift, not an apology, just a single act that never landed. In my journal that night, I wrote, Some love you just enough to send it, but not enough to let it arrive. I didn't need to call her. I didn't need her to explain. But I understood something in that moment that I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. Sometimes silence isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's all someone knows how to offer. The next morning, I drove back to the house where everything had started. I didn't call ahead. I didn't plan to stay. I parked 2 blocks down and walked the rest of the way. The air warm enough to skip a coat, but cool enough to sting a little. The front yard looked the same shutters, same creak in the gate. I stood there for a moment, then pulled the sealed envelope from my bag. Inside was a signed copy of the Kinship Disclosure Act and a handwritten note. I didn't write this to punish you. I wrote it so no one else has to be erased like I was. I slid it through the front door mail slot. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't wait to see if anyone was home. I turned and walked back the way I came. That evening, I passed by the Capitol building. Reporters were gathered on the lawn, still trying to tie my name to something louder, something flashier. A man from one of the news blogs called out after me. Governor Varnes, off the record, are you satisfied with how this ended? I didn't stop. Drexel caught up with me a few steps later, hands in his pockets. You okay? He asked. I looked ahead. Nothing really ends, I said, but now it can begin without pretending. We crossed the plaza, the sounds of the city swallowing our footsteps. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour. I didn't need a headline. I didn't need closure. I needed the truth to have room to breathe. They tried to end my story. I just decided I'd write the sequel myself. Hi, my name's Venna. They told everyone I didn't care about weddings, that I wasn't the type to wear dresses or fall in love. They spent my wedding fund on my twin sister's ceremony, deleted me from every family photo, and then used the venue I designed, my design, to celebrate her like I never existed. But the worst part? They didn't scream. They didn't shove me out the door. They just quietly erased me. So tell me, what do you do when the people who raised you build an entire life on top of your silence? And what happens when you stop letting them? I arrived at my parents' house at 6:42 a.m., luggage in tow, eyes burning from the sleepless red-eye out of Seattle. The sky was still gray, heavy with that stale early-morning California quiet. The front door creaked open when I twisted the knob, unlocked, as always. I stepped inside, dragging my suitcase over the warped threshold. No one came to greet me. Voices echoed from the kitchen, laughter, coffee brewing. Someone clinked a spoon against a ceramic mug. I followed the sound. My father was standing at the counter, buttering toast. He glanced up, blinked once, then mumbled, "Oh, you made it," before going back to his plate, like I was the guy from Amazon dropping off a package. In the corner, Delaney was surrounded. Her friends, our mother, even Aunt Gina from Fresno had made it early. They were fawning over swatches of napkin colors and bridesmaid dress samples. It was like walking into someone else's birthday party uninvited, even though I'd been listed on the invitation. Technically, Delaney saw me, smiled faintly. "You look tired," she said. Not welcome. Not glad you're here. Just a reminder that I didn't look fresh enough to be camera ready. I dropped my bag by the hallway table, the thud barely audible over the chorus of admiration circling my sister. I didn't speak, just nodded once and moved toward the guest room. It still smelled like cedar and dust. The rest of the day blurred into small talk and long silences. I kept my distance, doing my best not to hover near Delaney or Mom too long. Everything I said seemed to land with a thud. There was always a better story to pivot to: Delaney's spa expansion, her upcoming honeymoon, or how her fiancé treats her like royalty. After dinner, the wedding planner, a woman named Ray, who looked like she moonlighted as a talk show host, arrived with the official itinerary. Everyone huddled into the living room. I sat on the far end of the sectional, legs crossed, watching Mom flip through the papers like they were gospel. "Welcome remarks, Mr. Kane," Ray announced. "Maid of honor speech, Callie Jensen." I waited for the next line. There wasn't one. No reading, no toast, no thank you from the sister who'd once stolen my toys and my passwords, and now, apparently, my wedding fund. No roll at all. "Did you need me for anything?" I asked, keeping my voice flat, neutral. "Oh," Ray said, blinking. "I was told you wouldn't be involved directly in the program." "By who?" "It's just simpler this way," Mom chimed in, smiling too tightly. "We didn't want to put pressure on you." Pressure. That word did a lot of lifting in this family. I folded my napkin with precision, corner by corner, and laid it down on the armrest. Later that night, I sat stiffly on the edge of my old twin bed. Yes, still the same bed from high school, watching the walls around me. All the old posters and trophies that once hung there had been replaced with polished frames of Delaney's high school awards. My own things? Disappeared, packed into bins and shoved into the attic, if they even still existed. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me, barely moving the heavy air. I opened my laptop, stared at the screen. My inbox was full, but I wasn't reading emails. I was looking for something else, something that hadn't yet formed a name. Downstairs, they were playing a slideshow, Delaney's childhood journey for the welcome dinner. I could hear the oohs and ahs through the vents. After a few minutes, I wandered down and stood at the edge of the living room, a photo of her blowing out candles, another with her holding a swim meet trophy, then middle school, then senior prom. I waited. Nothing. Not a single picture with both of us. None of the moments we were dressed up like matching princesses. None of the awkward dance recitals we endured side by side. Just Delaney. Just her. Shining. Alone. "Were there no pictures with both of us?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Mom didn't look up from her wine. "You always hated the camera, remember?" I did remember, but not the way she meant. I remembered getting pushed out of frame, being told, "Let your sister have this moment." That wasn't hate, that was training. I didn't argue. I stood there until the slideshow ended. No one noticed I never sat down. Back in the bedroom, I turned off the overhead light and let the laptop screen glow across my face. I scrolled through old emails from my firm, checked a few investment dashboards, barely reading. Then I opened a blank note. I typed one sentence. Not again. Then another. Not this time. I closed the lid. I didn't sleep. Not really. I just lay there, eyes open, watching the ceiling twist itself into a mess of imaginary shapes. They bled into each other, lines that tried to become something but never did. My mind wouldn't settle. It buzzed with static, replaying everything, picking at memories like a scab that refuses to close. Sometime around midnight, the stillness grew too loud. I slipped out from under the covers. The guest bed creaked like it knew I didn't belong there. The room was too warm and too quiet, the air thick with old perfume and forgotten expectations. I stepped into the hallway, where that damn wall clock ticked off kilter, always just a beat behind. Even its rhythm was off in this house. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed out. Not out of the house entirely, not yet, but away. Somewhere untouched by the chaos upstairs. Somewhere that didn't wear Delaney's fingerprints like fresh paint. I grabbed an old hoodie from the back of a chair and padded downstairs, barefoot and quiet. The garage door protested as I pushed it open, the hinges groaning like they hadn't been loved in years. A cold draft greeted me, sharp against my legs. The air out there smelled like oil, rust, and dust, forgotten summers, and half-finished projects. No candles. No eucalyptus linen spray. Just truth. It was the only space in the house that hadn't been remodeled or rebranded. No Pinterest-perfect shelves or curated photo walls, just old boxes stacked like relics, tools rusted at the edges, and shelves littered with junk from 3 decades of, "We might need this someday." I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe something to prove that once, just once, someone saw me. Really saw me. Not the backup daughter. Not the "you're so independent" default. Just Venna. I brushed past a pile of winter coats, ducked beneath an old tarp, and there it was. Tucked in the far corner like a secret. A faded trunk with peeling edges, and a handwritten label half faded into the cardboard. Venna. Attic? My breath caught. I pulled it out, slow and careful, the way you do when something feels sacred. A puff of dust billowed up as I wiped my sleeve across the top. The latch stuck for a second, then gave with a pop. The lid creaked open. The scent hit instantly. A mix of aged cardboard, old wood, and that familiar note of floral soap. Grandma's favorite, the kind she bought in wrapped bars from the farmer's market. It smelled like Saturdays in quiet kindness. On top, folded neatly, was a stack of old blankets. Beneath them, tucked like a treasure, was a photo album. Yellowed at the corners. Soft leather cover. I set it aside with reverence. Below it lay something wrapped in faded cotton. A bundle. Light in my hands. I unwrapped it slowly, like peeling open a memory. A doll, not plastic, not store-bought. Handmade. Every stitch was deliberate. Her yarn hair was a warm brown, and her boots were tiny felt things sewn on with care. But that wasn't what got me. It was her dress, or rather, the name embroidered across it. Venna. My name, spelled right, centered, proud. I stared at it for what felt like forever. I couldn't remember the last time I saw my name written that way on something that mattered. Not Vina, not V, not Delaney's sister, just me. And beneath the doll, another surprise. An envelope, yellowed, still sealed. My heart knew what it was before my fingers even touched it. Grandma's handwriting, clean, sharp, impossibly elegant. Even her cursive had intention. I sat down, right there on the cold concrete floor, back against the wall. My legs folded up to my chest, and I cracked the envelope open with care. The letter was short, but it stopped time. I know this family forgets you more than they should, but I never did. I saw you. I always did. This fund is for your wedding, yours alone. Promise me you'll use it for something that belongs to you. I didn't cry. The ache was too old for tears. It lived deeper than that, in places where grief dries out and becomes something more like endurance. I folded the letter back up, carefully, like it might break if I wasn't gentle. Then I held the doll tight against my chest. She was small, soft, but solid. And she had my name. A name someone thought was worth stitching in thread. Something shifted inside me. Not peace, not forgiveness, but maybe, just maybe, recognition. The feeling of being quietly affirmed, of someone having seen me when I wasn't loud enough to demand it. I stayed there a while. The garage was cold, but it didn't bother me. It was honest in a way the rest of the house wasn't. No framed lies, no polished stories. Eventually, I crept back inside. The hallway was silent. I passed the closed doors. Mom and Dad's room breathing with soft snores. Delaney's sealed tight behind the hum of a white noise machine. Theirs were the sounds of people who slept easily, unburdened. My room hadn't changed much. Just the mattress felt smaller, the walls closer in. I set the doll gently on the windowsill and wiped the dust from her face with the hem of my sleeve. The moonlight caught the silver thread in her name, made it glow like it knew how much I needed that shimmer. I slipped the letter beneath my pillow. Its weight grounded me more than any apology ever could. My eyes swept the bookshelf before I lay down. Delaney's trophies still lined hers. Cheer captain, volunteer of the year, entrepreneur feature in the local news. Mine, still empty. And that was okay. Tonight, I had something better than plaques. I had a letter, a doll, a piece of proof stitched in thread that said I was here. I mattered. I wasn't just the girl in the background of Delaney's highlight reel. They'd spent so long carving me out of the picture. But Grandma? She left something behind to make sure I never disappeared completely. Morning light crept in through the slats of the blinds, uninvited. It spread across the ceiling in thin strips, warming nothing. I blinked against it, dry-eyed and exhausted, my body still but my thoughts in constant motion. Sleep had stayed away, too smart to hang around someone like me, with a brain that never stops looping what-ifs. I lay there for a while, arms across my chest like a corpse, listening to the old house groan and creak. It had its own kind of language, this house, familiar but uninterested in comfort. A floorboard shifted, pipes hummed faintly, and from downstairs came the low murmur of conversation, the occasional clink of dishes, and the high, bright lilt of laughter. The kind you can only pull off when you're not worried who isn't laughing with you. When I finally made my way down, the kitchen was already alive. My mother was by the counter, pouring orange juice into tall glasses like we were in some magazine shoot. Delaney sat at the table, scrolling on her phone, her hair curled and face made up like every day was prom. Dad had the paper spread wide in front of him, like he was waiting for a time machine to bring back Walter Cronkite. They all looked up when I walked in. Nobody smiled. Nobody said good morning. Not even a nod. Just a flick of the eyes, and then back to whatever version of normal they were committed to upholding. I sat at the far end of the table, the chair cold even through the fabric of my sweatpants. Mom slid a mug toward me, her gesture casual, the kind of act people think covers entire years of distance. "Coffee's fresh," she offered, like she was doing me a favor. Like a warm drink fixes something as fundamental as being ignored. The conversation barely paused. They were deep in the logistics of table centerpieces and whether peonies would hold up in humid weather. I listened without listening, the mug warm against my palms. Then Mom just said it. No warning, no buffer. "We ended up using the fund Marta left. It covered the photographer and Delaney's gown," she said, flipping through a catering invoice with the disinterest of someone reading parking regulations. I went still. "The fund?" I asked, too softly. My fingers clenched around the mug. "You mean my wedding fund?" She looked up at me, blinking like I'd asked about the weather on Neptune. "Oh, honey," she said, tone sweetened by long practice. "You were always so busy with work. We figured, why let it just sit there?" No apology, no acknowledgement that it was meant for me. Just logistics, like she was explaining how she donated an extra can of soup. Dad cleared his throat without looking up. "Delaney's doing most of the planning herself. She deserves something nice." Deserves. That word hit me square in the chest, sharp as glass. I leaned back in the chair, trying to stay calm. "Why didn't anyone ask me?" Delaney looked up then. Her mascara was perfect. Her expression wasn't. "Because Mom said you wouldn't mind. You've always been more logical than romantic. Logical. That's how they've always labeled me. Efficient, low maintenance. The one who didn't ask for much because she knew not to." Mom nodded, like Delaney had proved her point. "You don't even wear dresses, Venna. You've never seemed like the wedding type." And there it was. The truth behind all the smiles and casual indifference. I wasn't the kind of woman worth planning for. I wasn't the kind they imagined walking down an aisle. Because I didn't play the part, didn't fit the frame. It didn't matter that it was never about the dress or the flowers or the cake. It was about the gesture. The fact that Grandma Marta, quiet and sharp as she was, had seen something in me. Enough to leave something behind. A small reserve of hope for a future celebration. And now it was gone. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words inside me weren't safe. I stood, walked over to the sink, and rinsed my mug with more force than necessary. Water splashed, dripped. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of the faucet. "Venna," Mom said gently, "don't make this into a thing." I turned to her, my voice flat. "I'm not making it anything. You already did." And then I walked out. Upstairs, in the old guest room, I paced. I didn't know what else to do. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the doll on the windowsill, the one with the faded yellow dress and the hand-stitched name sewn across her chest. My name, the kind of gift you only get if someone really sees you. I picked up my laptop and opened the folder marked Westbridge Reports. My company's quarterly statement sat at the top, highlighted. I clicked it open. There it was. Our holdings in the luxury venue group, just acquired. We're already appreciating. I switched to my email and began typing, requesting updated ownership documents. Urgent. Sent. Then I sat there, staring at the screen's black reflection. I could see my face in it. Eyes tired, mouth set hard. The same expression I wore at 8 years old, watching Delaney's birthday unfold like a parade, while I stood in the back with a plastic fork and a reused gift bag. "Let her have her moment," they said. "It's her day." It was always her day. Even now, when the one thing meant for me could have been a quiet act of respect, they turned it into another spotlight for her. But this time, I wouldn't be the one left standing in the shadows. They could keep their photo booth and their monogrammed napkins. I didn't need a gown to make a statement. I had leverage, and this time, I was going to use it. The next morning started like any other in this house. Too many voices in too tight a space. I came downstairs around 10 a.m., knowing full well no one would be waiting on me. Delaney and Mom were already at the dining table, hunched over fabric samples and catering estimates. Dad was absent, probably pretending to be busy in the garage so he wouldn't be dragged into choosing napkin colors. I moved quietly toward the coffee pot, but I didn't sit. I didn't need to. "Here," Mom said, handing Delaney a folder filled with paperwork. "These are the final walkthrough materials for the venue. Don't forget to confirm with the florist again. She's flighty." I poured my coffee slowly. The folder sat open on the table, pages spilling out slightly. One caught my eye, not because of its format, but because I recognized it. The floor plan, my floor plan. Down to the half-moon patio facing the lake, the tiered garden layout, the glass-paneled reception hall with split lighting zones. 2 years ago, I'd submitted that exact concept for an expansion proposal through Westbridge. It had been too expensive, too unrealistic, too ambitious. And now, here it was, front and center on my sister's wedding packet, with no mention of me anywhere. I stepped closer and asked carefully, "Where's the venue again?" Delaney didn't look up. "Westbridge Lakeside. Isn't it stunning?" I nodded. "Yeah, I know it well." Mom beamed like she'd just bought a house in Beverly Hills. "Your sister picked it herself. She's always had an eye for style." I stood there, coffee cooling in my hand, while a blueprint I had once been proud of was now just another backdrop for someone else's perfect day. A few hours later, I shut the guest room door and sat down at my laptop. My fingers moved quickly, pulling up Dropbox, searching archived folders, rechecking dates. The original proposal was still there. Same name, same layout, same design notes in the margins. They hadn't just taken a venue. They'd taken my work, my idea. They built their fantasy on something I created, and then tossed me out of the credits. I opened a browser tab and checked the firm's internal dashboard. Westbridge Holdings. Stakeholder status, still active. Estimated return, up 18% this quarter. Funny how things resurface when you stop letting people walk over you. I had just minimized the window when a text buzzed across the screen. A name I hadn't seen in 5 years. Thalia Brackett. Can we talk for a second? It's been years. My chest tightened, not with fear, but caution. Thalia and I had been inseparable in college, roommates, confidants, late-night Waffle House philosophers. And then, one day, she just stopped showing up. I stepped out onto the back patio, closed the sliding door behind me, and called her back. She picked up on the first ring. "Venna," she said, breathless. "Thank you for calling." I kept my tone even. "It's been a while?" "I know, I don't deserve this. She paused. "Your mom reached out to me after graduation. She said you didn't handle closeness well, that you cut people off when they got too near." I sat down on the bench, letting that land. "She told me," Thalia continued, "that you had emotional distance, that you'd never say it, but you didn't really want me around." The wind moved the patio chimes gently. I didn't speak. I let her keep going. "And I believed her. I'm sorry. I thought I was respecting your space, but now I realize I was just manipulated." There was a beat of silence, not awkward, just thick with years of absence. "I regret it, Venna. All of it." "I know," I said softly. "We didn't say goodbye. The line just went quiet." Back inside, I sat at the desk again and opened my notes app. I titled a new document, Reclamation Phase 1. Bullet by bullet, I wrote. Confirm ownership shares. Review vendor contracts. Reassign control of planning operations. Legal angle. Explore trademark on design. They'd taken what I built and turned it into another Delaney shrine. But they forgot one thing. I'm not the same little girl they used to crop out of pictures. And this time, I held the pen. They didn't just steal a venue. They revived the one place I was told I didn't belong. By the time the sun filtered through the blinds, I was already sitting at my childhood desk, still in the same t-shirt I'd worn to bed. My laptop was open, cursor blinking on the screen, the email I'd written the night before still fresh in the draft folder. I hadn't sent it yet. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to watch the world wake up, knowing I wasn't going to sleepwalk through this anymore. 10 minutes later, my inbox chimed. Subject, Revised Shareholder Distribution, for internal use only. I clicked it open, expecting a generic quarterly breakdown from Westbridge Holdings, but what I saw made my heart pause. My name, full and spelled correctly, was listed first. Equity, 38%. Highest stake, majority vote. I blinked twice, reread the numbers, and sat back. This wasn't just a symbolic investment I made years ago, back when I still believed showing up early and staying late meant someone would eventually see your worth. I didn't just have a voice in this. I had authority, real, legal, notarized power. The venue Delaney had chosen, the one they all applauded her for, wasn't hers to control. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. I closed the email, opened the stakeholder dashboard, and sat quietly for a moment. The screen glowed soft blue, peaceful and steady. Beneath it, the menu. Vendor approval, contract overview, emergency action protocol. I didn't click anything. Yet. Around noon, I changed into jeans and a dark green blouse, tied my hair back, and left the house. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I figured they wouldn't ask. The cafe was a few blocks down from the river. I picked the table farthest from the sidewalk and ordered an iced tea I had no intention of drinking. The sun was warm on my arms, but I barely felt it. My thoughts were racing faster than my pulse. Then I saw him. Rowan. He hadn't changed much. Maybe a little more sun on his skin, maybe a few more lines near his mouth. But the walk was the same, confident without arrogance. That used to be my favorite thing about him. He stopped when he reached the table, hand half raised like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to sit or just say hello and leave. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He took the chair across from me, smiled nervously. "You look good." "I know," I said simply, not as defiance. just fact. He laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. It's been 6 years. Give or take. I wanted to say something earlier, but it felt off. Too late. Too much time passed. I nodded. You're here now, so say it. He exhaled and leaned in. I had the ring, Venna, back then. I was ready. And your mom? She pulled me aside one day, said you weren't interested in marriage, that you didn't believe in love. She made it sound like it would embarrass you if I proposed. The words sat between us like static. She said you'd say no. He didn't say it cruelly, just plainly. Like he was trying to deliver a truth he didn't want to carry anymore. I didn't ask, he added. I just let it go. I stirred the ice in my glass. You believed her. He nodded once, slow. Yeah, and I shouldn't have. We sat in silence. Not comfortable, not hostile. Just real. I loved you, I said. He looked up, startled. I did. And I would have said yes. There it was. Too late and still true. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I'm not, I said. If that hadn't happened, I'd still be chasing after people who never asked what I wanted. Now I know exactly who they are and who I am. We didn't hug, didn't promise to meet again. We just stood and nodded. Closure doesn't always need applause. Later that night, back in the guest room, I logged in again. This time I didn't hesitate. In the corner of the screen, a button blinked. Access level upgrade. I clicked it. Admin status confirmed. Vendor override permissions granted. Contract freeze authority activated. I hovered over the event control tab. Freeze event operations, pending review. I wasn't ready to press it, but I would be. Because this wasn't Delaney's dream venue. It was mine. And I was done building castles for other people's crowns. The cursor still blinked on the screen long after I'd shut the laptop. I didn't press the button that night. I didn't need to, not yet. Just knowing I could was enough to quiet the chaos in my chest. At least until the next family meal. By late afternoon the next day, the dining table was set for 6. My mother, always a fan of overcompensating through food, had laid out a spread that could have fed 15. Chicken salad, dinner rolls, deviled eggs, even her lemon tart. The one she only made on holidays or when she needed to butter someone up. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. I didn't say anything. Just pulled out the chair at the far end of the table, unfolded my napkin, and sat. The air was too sweet, the kind of cheerful that makes your skin itch. Delaney was chirping about centerpiece options, while Dad nodded like he was hearing any of it. I let them talk. When Mom stepped away to grab something from the kitchen, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I placed it gently on the table, right in front of Dad. Didn't speak, didn't make a show of it. He picked it up, opened it. His expression changed almost immediately. I watched his eyes dart from line to line, then land on the signature at the bottom. His own. It was the bank transfer authorization, the one that moved my wedding fund into a joint account Delaney used for her planning. Delaney went quiet. Mom re-entered the room, carrying a pitcher of iced tea. She caught the silence first, then the look on Dad's face. "What's going on?" she asked, setting the glass down a little too hard. I spoke calmly, like I'd been rehearsing it. Just showing Dad the form he signed, the one that moved the inheritance Grandma left me into Delaney's bridal account. Mom's face didn't flinch. "You were never going to use it." "That wasn't your call to make." She let out a sharp exhale, laughing like I was being ridiculous. "Venna, this again? You always find a way to twist everything back to yourself. Your sister is getting married. She needed help. You have a career. You're independent. And frankly, you've always been—" I waited. She finished it. "Jealous. It's in your nature." Dad looked down at his plate. Delaney froze. "And I?" I didn't blink. "Jealous," I repeated. "Of being erased from photo albums? Of being the contingency plan in every family decision? Of being useful when it's convenient and invisible the rest of the time?" Mom straightened her back, her voice firmer. "You don't understand what it means to be part of a family." "No," I said. I understand it too well. That's the problem. The table sat in stunned silence. I stood, slow and deliberate, collected my napkin, and folded it neatly on the edge of my plate. Then, without raising my voice, I looked at my sister. You say you didn't know, but the silence you kept, that was a choice. Delaney looked down. Please don't ruin this for me, she whispered. I leaned forward just enough to meet her gaze. You already did, I replied. You just thought no one would notice. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in the hallway. I went upstairs, closed the door to the guest room, and opened my laptop again. The venue dashboard loaded instantly. My access level still said Admin. Status, Event Live. I hovered over the same button I'd seen the night before. Freeze vendor access. Confirm. My hand stayed still. I wasn't ready, not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted them to think they were still in control. I wanted to watch what they built on borrowed pieces of me, knowing the foundation was mine. They thought I was bitter because I went quiet, but what they never realized is that silence has a cost, and I'd been paying the interest for years. The next morning started later than planned. I let the sun pour through the blinds until the room felt too warm to ignore. After a quick shower and a bland granola bar, I didn't finish. I grabbed my laptop, slid it into my bag, and left the Airbnb without a word to the host. I wasn't coming back after this. The venue was across town, nestled just beyond a gated community that looked like it was designed to impress in-laws. I gave my name at the front desk, and the assistant, a young woman in a headset, barely glanced up before handing me a clipboard and visitor badge. Vendor access tour, right? She asked. Something like that, I said, taking the badge. The venue manager was delayed, which suited me fine. I wandered through the garden hall, pretending to check lighting angles and floral setups. In reality, I was following the sound of Delaney's voice. James surprised me with this venue, she was saying to her bridesmaids, who were huddled around her like she was royalty. He said I deserved the best, and honestly, this place just screams us, doesn't it? A few of them nodded enthusiastically. One of them, Callie, I think, added, He's spoiling you. I mean, this place must have cost a fortune. Delaney beamed. Well, that's what happens when you marry a man who gets what you're worth. She laughed. The rest followed. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I pulled out my phone, slid to record, and let the video run for 10 seconds. That was enough. I walked past them without saying a word. Delaney saw me, but her expression didn't shift. If anything, she smiled wider. Back in the car, I parked under a tree and replayed the clip. Her voice, crystal clear, her lie, loud enough to echo. This wasn't just embellishment. It was theft. Not of property, but of identity. She took everything that had my fingerprint on it and claimed it like it was a bridal accessory. Another thing handed to her because the world had always done that. Not this time. I opened the Westbridge portal, logged into my admin account, and navigated straight to the operations panel. Status: Active event. Name: Shaw Milford. Wedding date. Tomorrow I clicked into the emergency protocols and uploaded a PDF. My shareholder proof. 38%. Verified, validated. I clicked Stakeholder Action, Override Planning Access. Then came the prompt. Reason for event disruption. I typed, Stakeholder action due to breach of ethical alignment and false public representation of venue ownership. My hand hovered over the last button. Confirm? I thought about everything. About the check my parents signed without asking. About the slideshow I was never part of. About Thalia and Rowan. And about that stitched name on the doll in my suitcase. I clicked. A soft ping. Event status: Cancelled. Vendor network alerted. Contract revoked. Just like that, the machine stopped. No fireworks, no storm, just a simple line of text that closed a chapter they never let me write. By the time I returned to the Airbnb, my phone was already buzzing. I let it ring. I sat on the bed, kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and turned the volume to silent. Somewhere across town, vendors were calling in, caterers were freezing deliveries, The planner was probably having a meltdown, and Delaney was realizing the crown she thought she wore had always been borrowed. By late evening, the calls turned into texts. Lorraine first. Call me now. Then Delaney. Why would you do this? Everything's falling apart. Then, more desperately, I'm begging you. Just undo it. Please. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked onto the small balcony, glass in hand, watching Sacramento glow in the distance. Not mocking, not mourning, just still. They never imagined I'd fight back. They never thought the quiet one would hold the match. But when a castle is built on stolen bricks, it only takes one pull at the right seam for the whole thing to crack. I didn't ruin her wedding. I simply reclaimed what was mine before they dressed it in her name. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. Something about letting go, truly letting go, keeps you upright even when the world expects you to break. By the time the sun began to stretch across the Sacramento skyline, I was dressed, bag packed, and headed to a co-working space near Midtown. No one at the front desk paid me much attention, and that suited me just fine. The building was half full, the usual crowd of consultants and freelancers sipping oat milk lattes and staring into glowing screens. I chose a corner desk by the window, one where no one could look over my shoulder, and set up my laptop. It took less than a minute to log into the burner email account I'd set up the night before. No name, no profile image, just enough anonymity to deliver the truth without the usual performance of confrontation. Subject line, for your information only. I paused for a second, then began filling in recipients. Lorraine Kane, Delaney Shaw, Jared Milford, a handful of relatives, the wedding vendors I had contact records for, and a few carefully selected people from Delaney's work circle, the ones who mattered most to her image. Attachments? 3 files. The first, a screenshot of the official West Bridge cancellation notice, time-stamped and clearly showing my name as the majority stakeholder. The second, a scanned transfer slip, $12,000, wired 3 years ago, when Delaney's spa was circling the drain after a failed promotion campaign. My name, her account. The third, screenshots of our WhatsApp conversation from that week. Delaney, I don't know how to thank you. I won't forget this ever. Me, just get back on your feet. That's enough. It wasn't petty. It was proof. I typed my message. No theatrics. No emotional appeals. This isn't revenge. It's correction. This is to ensure that next time you tell the story, you'll remember all the parts you tried to forget. Then, without ceremony, I hit send. There was no pop-up, no "are you sure?" confirmation. Just a soft whoosh. And silence. I leaned back in the chair, letting the afternoon light warm my face. Around me, people kept typing, editing, pitching. The world moved, like it always does. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't trailing behind it. Back across town, the ripple started to spread. I wouldn't know the full extent until later, but I imagined the chain reaction like dominoes. Mom yelling at Dad, "Get her on the phone!" Delaney scrambling to call the florist, trying to uncancel what couldn't be undone. The planner crying into her iPad, the caterer putting trays of filet mignon back into the freezer. And Jared realizing the woman he was about to marry had lied to everyone, including herself. I got one reply, from my Aunt Sheila. Subject, I'm sorry. Venna, I always suspected. I never had the full picture, but I knew something wasn't right. I wish I had said something sooner. I believe you, and I'm proud of you. No fluff, no excuses. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the browser, deleted the email account, and shut the laptop. Outside, the street buzzed with weekend energy. People walking dogs, pushing strollers, laughing like the world hadn't just shifted underneath one family's perfectly curated photo wall. I stayed at the desk another 20 minutes, watching the cursor blink on a blank document I never ended up writing in. Not everything needs to become a memoir. Some stories just need to be told once. Back at the Airbnb, I packed the last of my things. One small suitcase, one carry-on. The stitched doll went in carefully, wrapped in a sweatshirt. The letter from Grandma folded beneath it, the handwriting still crisp despite everything it had been through. I looked around the room one final time. The sheets were slightly wrinkled, the curtains still drawn. Nothing left of me here. No scent, no noise, no trace. I didn't leave a note, didn't notify anyone I was leaving. My flight back to Seattle was booked for 9:15 the next morning. I would land before noon, take the light rail home, and order the same Thai takeout I always did after a hard day. Routine has its mercy. That night, I sat by the window, sipping the last of a cheap bottle of wine, letting the quiet hold me like it never had before. I didn't need their apology. I just needed the silence to finally tell the truth out loud. A month had passed since I returned to Seattle, and the air had changed, not outside, but inside me. Everything felt quieter now, still, not stagnant, like the calm that settles after a storm no one believed would come. I'd unpacked slowly, deliberately, not just boxes, but thoughts, feelings, memories I never made space for before. My new apartment sat on the 4th floor of a walk-up in Capitol Hill. Nothing fancy. Bare floors, clean white walls, wide windows that let in more light than I knew what to do with. The kind of space you could breathe in. The kind of space where you could hang what mattered. One wall remained blank for weeks. I kept staring at it, unsure if I was saving it for something or protecting it from something. Then, one Saturday, I knew. I'd spent the morning at a local print shop, enlarging and reprinting family photos I had scanned from old albums, ones where I had been cropped out, or left out entirely. The gaps were always obvious once you knew where to look. A hand on the edge of a frame, a strand of hair that didn't match Delaney's color, a birthday party where the number on the cake told me I was there, even if the camera never caught me. When I got home, I laid each photo on the living room floor. For every missing version of me, I added something, an outline, a shadow, a caption in gold ink that read simply, "I was here." Not for their benefit, for mine. That afternoon, I hung them in a grid, 12 pieces, a timeline of deliberate remembrance. Standing back, I took it all in. Not revenge, not nostalgia, just recognition. A few days later, I received an invitation from my firm, a black tie gala at the Fairmont, honoring clients and partners who'd expanded into new markets. I'd helped 3 of them do just that in the last quarter. I stared at the envelope on the kitchen counter for a long time before opening my closet. The dress I picked wasn't expensive. It wasn't from a boutique. Just something soft and dark and well-fitting. No sequins, no slit. No need for a stylist. Years ago, I could still hear my mother scoff. "Let's not waste a stylist on you. Emily's the one who needs to shine." Back then, I thought she was right. Now? I looked in the mirror, smoothed the sleeves down my arms, and said softly, "I don't need to shine. I just need to stand." And I did. 2 days later, a voicemail landed in my inbox. My mother's voice, brittle under forced sweetness. "Hi, sweetheart. We miss you. Your father wants to talk. Your sister is, well, she's having a hard time." I didn't delete it. A few hours after that, another message arrived, this time from Delaney. "People are talking. I've lost 5 clients this week. I don't know what to say anymore. I don't know how to fix this." I opened the message, typed 1 sentence. Then, maybe stop painting over things that weren't yours to begin with. I hit send. No punctuation. No name. That night, I opened the drawer beside my bed and unfolded my grandmother's letter. I hadn't read the back before. The paper had been folded that way for years, probably sealed by time and forgetfulness. But there it was. A short note. Make a home of your own, even if it's made of the pieces they left behind. I placed the letter beneath the photo collage. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I poured a glass of wine, opened the balcony door, and stepped into the cool air. Seattle pulsed below, streetlights flickered, buses hummed, someone was playing jazz through a cracked window nearby. It didn't welcome me exactly, but it didn't shut me out either. It was just there. And maybe, Finally, so was I. I didn't win anything, I just stopped playing their game. And maybe that's what healing really is.